Welcome back, guys. In today's episode of Oxygen Not Included, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Puft here, and I believe that right there is our key to infinite oxygen production. Let me show you what I mean. Boom! Brothgar from the future. Now I know what you're thinking here. Puffs are meant to consume contaminated oxygen and then convert it to slime. However, what I'm explaining here is a bug in the current version of the game. For some reason, a Puft reaches a state where it's no longer consuming contaminated oxygen, but continuing to create more slime. So let me show you how this kind of works. For some odd reason, it works. I'm not saying I understand how. This video gave me tons of trouble because it kept flipping and I kept trying to debug the game while I was playing it. So, I mean, just to give you an example here, this is the actual me trying to record this game twice already. So hopefully the third time is a charm here. So here's what I'm going to do. Over here in the painter tool, this is using debug mode, I'm going to find contaminated oxygen. Now contaminated oxygen in game is actually polluted oxygen. There's a lot of different naming things that are going on right now. So let me see here. See, this area over here has one crap. See that? Slime. That's what I was talking about. Let me paint this sucker up right here. So this area right here has 1 kilogram of polluted oxygen in every single tile. Now, right down here is stinky. Now, this base has been running for many cycles now, completely without any exterior, intervention. It's just running forever, essentially. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this Puft up into this space, and what you're going to see is this runaway, like Puft Poo fusion reaction or whatever. So porting it up there, thank you guys for telling me about that using Alt and Q. I'm going to put that Puft hopefully in that area. Come on now. Oh, he didn't move. Stupid Puft. All right, so here's the Puft inside of this box right now. Now it's continuing to move around and consume polluted oxygen, but as you can see, that polluted oxygen is not being consumed at all, yet the amount of polluted oxygen is continuing to increase. Now, there's a lot of different variables that goes into this, so before you go and freak out about the comments, is that this is designed to consume polluted oxygen. Over here, you can see right here, this Puft here is consuming polluted oxygen at 1 kilogram per second right here in its natural state. Now, was that activated because I teleported it? No, I haven't found that be the key. To be honest, I have no idea what causes a Puft to lose its ability to consume contaminated oxygen or polluted oxygen or whatever the frick they're gonna call it. So here's the secret though. In this area right here, this is completely filled with polluted oxygen. With that, this Puft will consume or go through its animation very quickly and create lots and lots of slime. And because of that, it creates more and more polluted oxygen. Let me show you another trick here. Let me go ahead and kind of get rid of some of this, because you can see each one of these slime balls is emitting that polluted oxygen. Here's another trick here. Let me just show that to you real quick. If you take a Puft and you confine its space of movement, it doesn't have to move to then activate the next animation. So the smaller the space a Puft is in, the faster it will produce slime. Let me show you this. So this Puft right here has not very much room to like move around. Now this might be cruel, but if you take this sort of mesh tile right here so that you can get a lot of polluted oxygen around your Puft, what you can see is that this Puft here will just not move anywhere but continue to produce slime in this one spot. Now how you're gonna get a Puft into that spot is anybody's, good luck, right? But you can do this. The thing is, you need to have a space open above a Puft or it simply will not work. So you can see that this Puft right here, look at it, it's just stuck in one spot, continuously producing more and more slime. So you can see just how much slime is actually being generated right there. It's continuing to go up. We're now at 4 kilograms. Now it's at 5.7, and this will continue to increase right there. So one of the variables that we really needed to measure here, if you're really looking closely, is how much polluted oxygen is being emitted by that slime, because that's going to give us an idea of just how much polluted oxygen we're able to generate. It takes a duplicate. They need on average, they need 100 grams a second of oxygen. Now, it can be pure oxygen or it could be polluted oxygen, just like you can smell your own fart. It doesn't kill you, but it does stink, and it won't make you happy. So you can actually consume polluted oxygen. You know, your duplicate can live like that. So what I did is I actually took one of these slime balls here and I put it in an area down here which has 10 tiles, and then went over an entire day right there. So as you can see, this number is 42.5. However, the number kind of shows up and then goes away, and then shows up and goes away. What that averages out to over a day is 25 grams a second. So that's how much is actually being emitted by that polluted ball of slime. So even though that this ball right here is continuing to increase in its density of slime, it's not necessarily giving off the maximum amount of polluted oxygen. In order to truly get this reaction to the point where it's sustainable, what you need to do is free this Puft so that it has area, more area to move, so that it can create more slime balls. The more slime balls you have, the faster you're decaying slime into polluted oxygen. So you can see all the different balls that are moving up and down. If you continue to let this run forever, what you'll find is that once we get to 1,800 grams, which we're coming up right on here, we're going to see that slime is no longer emitting more polluted oxygen. So right now, we've passed over that point right there. It's 1,800 grams of polluted oxygen. Slime is no longer decaying. So now we're just continuing to increase more and more of that slime in this area here. This in turn opens up a couple of interesting options. Obviously, you can take slime and you can convert it into algae and polluted water and kind of go that direction just to see how much you kind of can produce clean oxygen, or how much you can turn that into fertilizer. Or the other thing is that you could try to keep the pressure lower and just live off of the polluted oxygen itself. So you can see how that's working right there. Even though it's obviously not necessarily designed to work that way, in the current build of the game, this is a kind of a weird, legitimate, funky strategy. So here's the test I really want to do. I want to see how much slime a Puft can make in a single day if you can find it to one spot right there. You're just trying to milk the Puft for all it's worth. Alright, so I've designed this little base over here. There's not a ton of polluted oxygen in it, but there is some. Let me go ahead and move this Puft over here. And what you'll notice is that this Puft actually can't move through a one square tile. It has to have two above it. So you can actually kind of create a pen, a Puft pen, that is 2 tiles tall and as long as you want it, with 1 tile opening, which your duplicate can actually crawl through. So it can get up there and take the slime, but keep the Puft in its location. It's an interesting tactic. Oh, and it teleported and died. No! Sometimes bad things happen. And that was it. Let me go find another one, see if I can survive the teleport. No! Oh, come on, game. This is what I'm talking about. Sometimes things are like really annoying and hard to do. Teleporting animals is like not a absolute science. Let me try it again. No, move. Oh, this one's broken. This happens too. Sometimes a Puft goes into a spasm. They become constipated and can no longer produce slime. If your life is dependent on a Puft right now, this is not a good sign. Okay, attempt number 2 here. Come on, slime. Come on, Puft. Don't die. Yes! Yes! Alright, that's working. So this number right here, the amount of slime that's possible to be generated by a Puft in a single day, is actually really important if you want to run like the real legitimate Puft Poo plan where you're converting contaminated oxygen or polluted oxygen, the stupid name thing. If you're converting that into slime, so that then you can convert it into other things right there, that is actually a really important number to understand. Obviously, you can go out and harvest it, and there's quite a bit of it all over the place, but it does take, a duplicate to go out there and dig that stuff, which is also kind of a stressful operation. All right, so there we have it. 1 day right there, 52 kilograms. All right, so that is 86.6 grams a second. That is how much slime is being produced by that Puft in a very confined space right there. Theoretical maximum, right? Alright, so if we just let this Puft run for a day, but in a more open space, I'll be able to count up how much slime is actually generated in a day. This might be a more real number. So rather than a theoretical maximum, this is kind of a more real, sustainable base case. Right? So this number is going to be quite a bit lower because first off, the Puft has to move to all these different locations in order to then create slime. So it takes longer to create slime in the first place. The other thing is that since there's more balls of slime, it's decaying at a much higher rate. So this Puft here honestly did not make really any noticeable slime at all. It all pretty much decayed. Now that sometimes happens and it sometimes kind of builds up. It's kind of a sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't sort of scenario. But as you can see right now, it's working. So with that, it isn't necessarily making a lot. And now it's kind of trying to make some. But once we get the pressure here to the maximum, it should, in theory, just continue to make more and more slime. This is what I'm talking about. The different points, sometimes you get a Puft that just like makes a lot of slime. Sometimes you get a Puft that hardly makes any slime. It's not a very consistent thing. And these are the things that have made this video so hard. I mean, look at this Puft. Now it's suddenly decided that I'm barely gonna make any slime. I don't know what to say. I'm gonna go with, let's just say 50 kilograms, 52 kilograms a day. And I'm gonna roll with that. Alright, so if we take a look at the biodistiller real quick, what we have here is it consumes 300 grams a second for slime, produces 100 grams a second of algae, and 200 grams a second of polluted water. So essentially it's, 1 part algae, 2 part polluted water. Pretty simple math. Alright, so if we take the theoretical maximum of slime that you can get out of a Puft, you'll find that is 52 kilograms, then becomes 17.3 kilograms of algae and 34.6 kilograms of polluted water. So now we need to take this one step further and take it into the algae deoxidizer and then also the fertilizer maker to see if it's sustainable. Alright, so if we take a look at the algae deoxidizer right there, it takes in 1,000 grams a second or 1 kilogram a second of algae and then produces 600 grams a second of oxygen right there. Interesting. So essentially, you could just multiply the algae by 0.6, and that's going to be your number. Taking a look at the fertilizer maker right there, you consume 150 grams a second of polluted water, but that only outputs 120 grams a second of fertilizer. So again, there is a bit of reduction in that process. So after all of that, you end up with 10.4 kilograms of oxygen and 27.7 kilograms of fertilizer. So how many plants and how many duplicants can you support with that? So there's two more variables we need to kind of understand right here. How much oxygen or polluted oxygen does a duplicant consume in a single day right there? Well, a duplicant consumes oxygen at a rate of 100 grams a second. You can see that right there. And it does expel some of that as carbon dioxide, but that's kind of a non-point. So it consumes it at 100. Multiply that by 600 and you can get 60 kilograms a day, which we know already is not enough. So that kind of starts to throw a wrench in the whole plan of sort of this perfect poo Puft plan. You need more than just one Puft in order to make this happen. But if we look at plants right here, the one sustainable plant that we have is a bristle blossom, so we can go ahead and plant that over and over again and it'll make more and more seeds. But we need fertilizer, and it takes 400 grams a cycle, so 4 kilograms a cycle. With that, we have a lot. So we can actually take that right there and divide it by 4,000, we'll see how many plants we can sustain. And what you end up with is just under 7 plants right there. So while you cannot live off of the oxygen alone produced from this sort of poo Puft plan thing where you take slime and then you distill it down to algae and polluted water and then convert it into fertilizer and oxygen, you can't necessarily live just off of that alone. However, you can support a farm off of it. Mind you, that's sort of theoretical. One saying that you can actually get a Puft into that location and that Puft is producing 52 kilograms a day. Maybe you get a lazy Puft and you get horrible results and half your plants die and then your colonists die. Or it just glitches out and doesn't create more slime, or it consumes the contaminated oxygen and it all falls apart. There's a lot of holes in this plan, but I'm just letting you know that's where we're at today. So with all that in mind, there's a second way of looking at this. If you don't try to convert that slime into, you know, algae and all that stuff and try to make clean oxygen, you can actually just live off of the polluted oxygen. And since you're already vomiting and pissing and turning that into fertilizer, this actually becomes a much easier way to make a fully sustainable base. See the example right down here. Stinky has been living in this horrible box of misery for quite a long time. He continues to plant his little bristle blossoms and then harvest them every couple of cycles right there. And this Puft goes around and poops out slime, which then produces enough oxygen for him to live right there. It takes only 4 slime balls in order to kind of get to the same level of where a duplicate is trying to breathe right there. And since his Puft was gone for a little while, the base is a little bit unstable. But if you can get more or less 5 of those slime balls down constantly, because your Puft is working really well, then you continue to produce more and more polluted oxygen right there, and it makes a very livable base. It also produces enough pressure for your bristle blossoms to stay alive and continue to grow. So if we just speed this up, a little bit more here, what we should see is that this will eventually become sustainable once again. So the things that are not needed in this horrible base right here is this biodistiller. We don't need that. We could just deconstruct that guy right there. I'm gonna leave the micro musher just in case I gotta intervene a little bit, just because I took the Puft out of here. This thermal regulator honestly should be over here next to the wheeze wart. Why is the wheeze wart there? It's meant to keep everything, it's meant to keep things cool, essentially. It's absolutely necessary. Alright, so as we can see, the pressure is starting to regain here. You're starting to get a little bit more contaminated oxygen, polluted oxygen, whatever we want to call it, into this space. And it's starting to work again. It's becoming sustainable. The real trick is it going to become sustainable before I starve to death or not. It's really important to have your bristle blossoms on cycles to where they continue to overlap one another in growth cycles. Alright, so I've got this base up to the point where it's actually running stable again. So it took a little while because this Puft here does not create that much more polluted oxygen than what is being consumed by the duplicate. However, now it's up and running. I got the bristle blossoms here continuously making more and more food for my guy. And the wheeze wart over here is keeping the temperatures down. If things spike up, then I go ahead and run this gas pipe a little bit just because the temperature spikes just over that little thermal switch. That is also my filter to filter out some of the carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide then gets pumped into the atmosphere outside. Eventually, I guess that atmosphere outside would become overpressurized and this sort of sustainable base would end. Or if you just kind of, forget to harvest something or something like that. But as you can see, this here should pretty much run for a very, very long time. So just to see what happens here, I'm going to go ahead and let this run for another, 30 cycles or so. Another thing I wanted to mention is that even though I said a duplicate consumes 60 kilograms of oxygen a day, as we can see, the real consumption is not necessarily that. That number actually changes sometimes for some odd reason. One day is 40 kilograms. That was a 31 kilogram day, 32, 50. So that number is not completely consistent. Why? I don't really know. Just another one of those variables inside of this game that makes it a little bit harder to predict exactly what's going to happen. Alright, so I've set a macro here just to harvest everything every day, and we'll see how long this goes. Ta-da! Looks like the game finally crashed. Took it a while. Did last a long time. Well, there you have it, guys. I've made it to cycle 181. It didn't take much more than harvesting. A couple of the changes I did do, though, just to kind of show you, was that I ended up taking the gas plumbing and running it both directions from my thermal regulator right here. Oh my gosh. So my thermal regulator is running both directions right there. That way this equipment over here is also cooled by the outputs of that regulator. That regulator isn't necessarily in the best place ever, but you know, it's in the spot where it needs. It is, and it works that way. The filter filters out that carbon dioxide so that it gets out of my base right there. And to be honest, you can really go a long time before that thing overpressurizes in any given amount of space, because you're really not making that much. The other things I also have is a couple of thermal switches that allow this to turn on if it gets too hot over here or if it gets too hot over there. Same sort of deal. If it gets too cold, the space heater here will turn on using those thermal switches to just maintain everything temperature wise. The Wheezewort over here does a good job of pulling away a lot of that heat energy, maintaining the nice temperature across the board here. Obviously you don't want things to get too hot, because then your bristle blossoms will not grow, and eventually you could also get your Puft to a point where it might die. The other thing is keeping the Puft away from things like the Wheezewort or really hot equipment, to where that would also kill it, and that's really easy to do with a Puft, because all you got to do is have like a gap like this and then it can't go through it. Morbs are a little bit different. They need like a little pit or something like that in order so that they don't, you know, run into that stuff and die. The other thing is you would need a lot of morbs. I had 5 duplicates up here that I killed, even though I didn't really get that many morbs. By my calculations, these morbs produce polluted oxygen at 7 grams a second. You'd need about 14 of these to actually maintain one duplicate continuously. So getting enough morbs seems like it's going to be kind of a challenge. Or you just kill off a lot of people. That works too. At the end of the day, I wish this experiment was a little bit more cut and dry, and I wish it didn't fight me like tooth and nail all the way to the end, but I think I got there. It's sustainable. You guys asked for a fully sustainable base. The easiest way to do it is kind of use a Puft. Even though this Puft isn't necessarily working the way it's probably meant to work in the future, currently in this state of game, it's possible to do it. That's my experiment. Hopefully you guys have found this somewhat informative or maybe enjoyable. Let me know down there in the comment section below, and also with the maybe like button down there if you want me to make more videos like this. Thank you guys for all the recommendations and also all the support. If I've earned your subscription, then thank you so much for that. Hopefully I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. Stay awesome. Peace. Brothgar out.